Good morning, everybody. Welcome in. It is good to see you. We're starting just a couple of minutes late. Potluck Sunday, you know how that goes. So we're glad everybody's here. Looking forward to a big day. And we have the youth night tonight in Lincoln, as in our youth are leading the service up there. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you're anticipating that also. Going to be a big day for sure. And it's starting with a story today with which we're very familiar. We know this guy super well, the rich young ruler. But I'm going to ask this question to you. Do we really know him as well as what we think? I'm looking forward to discussing him when the time is right. Our whole study in the 18th chapter of Luke, if you want to go ahead and make your way there, is going to surround this guy, the rich young ruler. But before we get to him, let's look at the events that lead up to this interaction that Jesus has with him. Again, we're in the 18th chapter of Luke. So happy that you've joined us. And we're going to start in the first verse. Before we get going, though, I want to remind you of something back in chapter 17. And I feel like this is instrumental, not only in the 17th chapter, but as well as we progress. In verse 5 of Luke 17, the apostles make this request of Christ: Lord, increase our faith. And so Jesus goes through these teachings and these interactions, and whether it's parables or miracles, he's doing all of these things to try to accommodate their request, to increase their faith. And I say that to say this as we cross into chapter 18 today. I think Jesus, through his teachings and through his interaction with people, is still trying to accommodate his disciples' request. He's attempting to grow their faith. And if we'll allow him through the process, I believe he's going to grow our faith today also. Verse 1 of chapter 18. Then he spoke a parable to them that men always ought to pray and not lose heart. How are you doing with this? Always praying. I want to give if you don't care just to hang on one sec, okay. I want to read two verses. I don't know if you make notes in your Bible with parallels. These are two really good verses, and then we'll try to piece this together maybe to understand this fully. 1 Thessalonians 5:17. I bet you know this one. 1 Thessalonians 5:17. By the way, if you don't know my good friend, Robbie Davis, you need to meet him. He was here a while back, but I missed him. I'm glad that he's here with us today. Robbie, what does that one say? I'm putting you on the spot.
That's fine. It's 3 words, and it's pray without ceasing.
I thought you might know that one. Good.
Yeah, but I had to remind myself what that was while I was thinking in my head, so I was glad I got it right. So I might be in heaven after all.
Okay. It's a supreme achievement. You know, enlightenment has taken place. So, very good, Robbie. Love that guy. It's not. No, that was the extra credit, Roy. You missed out. Sorry about that. So, no, it's pray. Hey, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. You never stop praying. All right, here's another one. That's a good cross-reference to Luke 18:1. This one comes from Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6, verse 18. There Paul writes, always praying, or always being in prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all prayer and supplication for all the saints. Praying always in all things. You never stop. And that's basically what's being stated here, isn't it? Luke 18, verse 1. Jesus spoke this parable to his disciples, saying that men always ought to pray. I think this might be the single most difficult command to fulfill. And here's why. Sometimes I need to sleep. Do you? Are you praying while you're sleeping? Now, it's possible that you might have said a prayer during a dream, all right, but outside of that, we probably haven't been following through on the Lord's commands. How about when you're eating? Not before you eat, while you're eating and chewing. Are you praying? How about while you're having everyday interactions, maybe at your job, and you're on the phone with somebody? Are you praying while you're talking to that person? That seems downright impossible, doesn't it? Well, okay. Justin, the last time I called, you better not have been praying while we were talking. I mean, you can't do that, right? What's meant by this? What's Jesus saying? Okay, all right. Well, we should always be in a prayerful mindset. I would certainly agree with that. You ever find yourself, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, not one of your main prayers of the day, but you ever find yourself just stopping and mentally it's a 5-second thank you God for, and you move on? You ever find yourself it's a real challenge, not one of your main prayers, quote unquote, but it's God, I could really use your help with this, and that kind of, and then you move on with. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah. Okay, so, and going back, yeah, you brought in a great verse, John, in Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, what does that exclude? Okay, thank you. Everything with prayer, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. So it's not just to ask about anything and everything that concerns you, but it's also to give thanks about anything and everything, even those things that might concern you. And that can include thanking God for the trial that He's allowing us to go through so that our faith can grow. Many things would go along with that. So let's go, Marty. Thank you for patiently waiting. Bingo. Yeah, typically the Jews did 3 times a day at least. Very good. Very good. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Roy. Yeah. Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I put you off. Sorry, Roy. That's my bad. Oh, good. Okay. Right. Sorry I disrespected you, Roy. Right. Good. Yeah. Well, and it's funny, and right behind me, Marty, I was just leaving. I opened the door, and here comes Marty with 48 jugs. He's balancing with, I think he had 2 stacked on top of each other on his head. And he expressed his excitement. Oh, man, you're a godsend. I think he said, but you're right. Whether with me and you being there and with me with Marty, it's even the smallest things in life. We're just so grateful for the way God does provide, right? Go ahead, sorry. I thought you were following up. No, okay. Yeah. Did I miss anybody else, Robbie?
Derek, I was just going to say that I will. It's a good reminder for me of where I need to be.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robbie. And I would agree, not just for every person in general, but very specifically for God's children, even the most mature, whether we are that or not, but even the most mature probably need this study more than any other. I mean, that's just a thought that I have. Could be off on that, but I believe that to be the case. So I want to talk about verb tense right here. He spoke a parable to them that men always ought to pray. That's a present verb tense. And the idea of the present verb tense, and it could be translated, men always ought to continue to pray, or ought to be praying, but it's probably better, ought to continue to pray. And I think with this little addition here, and not lose heart. You have a different terminology there? Not lose heart, that's New King James. ESV, I know, is also not lose heart. Anything else? Okay, let me switch over to, this is the NIV, not give up. The contemporary English version, never give up. The Message translation, never quit. And when you place these in contrast to one another, I think it can help to give a better picture. So what's the opposite of quitting praying or becoming discouraged in prayer? What's the opposite of that? You become encouraged or emboldened by prayer, and also that you don't stop praying instead of quitting a prayer life. And does that help to make a little better sense of it? Now, I'm going to just quit this for right now, but here in a little bit, when we get down to this parable that Jesus is going to give, I think it helps to better explain what he means by always praying. So he gives this parable to help to better understand how we ought to be consistent in our prayer lives. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Please. Very good. Yeah. And it goes back to Luke 17:5. Thank you for that, John. Lord, increase our faith. What is faith? It's trust, it's dependence upon God, and it's not reliance upon ourselves. So how do we increase our faith in God? Now, we might commonly think, well, I need to study the Bible more, and well, that's true, okay, I get that. But what Jesus is saying is, hey, increase your prayer life. Be more consistent in prayer, because in prayer, you're not revealing anything to God that He doesn't already know, but you're reiterating to yourself the dependence that you have on Him, as well as how great He is and how insufficient we are. That's going to tie into a second parable that Jesus is going to give here. Verse 2, saying, here's the first parable. There was in a certain city a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. I know this is earth-shattering for us to consider that there would possibly be a justice of law that didn't have a respect for God and didn't look out for the best of people. I know that's a strange thing in our minds, but apparently it is possible, okay, that a justice or a judge could be that way. And this one was. He doesn't care about God. He doesn't care about people. Verse 3, but there was a certain widow in that city. What would we know about a widow, and especially in this time? What would be some truths concerning her? Let's try our best we can from what we learned from history. First century Judea, back under the Roman rule. So a lady, her husband's passed away, and what will we know of her? Very likely to be the case. Okay, she's probably extremely poor. All right, anything else? I'm sorry? I missed it again. Not working. Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'm almost 40, so you got to say it about 16 times. Thanks. I got it that last time. So maybe there's a lack of smarts too, because you changed the terminology. I don't know your terminology. It's one-syllable words. It's never going to work, Adam. I'm sorry. All right, so moving on from that, though, and my deficiencies. Yeah, probably not working, in part because it might be difficult for her to find a task. Maybe physically she's not able to at this point. Probably, I should say, she might not have a lot of people to look out for her. The fact that she's trying to do this all on her own would probably suggest that to be the case. So there's this widow in this city, probably doesn't have much, doesn't have people to look out for her, might not be able to work at this point in her life, but she's able to, and she gets to this judge, and she makes this request: get justice from me, from my adversary. It would appear probably someone has taken advantage of her, maybe cheated her of the little bit that she would have had. Jesus spoke of warnings of those at that time who had devoured widows' livelihoods, who would take advantage of them, and this would probably be someone who's fallen into that boat. And verse 4, he would not. What a rotten guy. What kind of a guy wouldn't look out for someone who's disadvantaged, especially in a position to help? What kind of guy would be like that? I know we can't comprehend this, but there apparently could, hypothetically, be some judges who aren't very concerned about law. That's true. That's true. So there's a lot to it. We don't know. Excuse me. We don't know the full story, and sometimes you have to operate at the speed of law and the justice system. I know this might knock the socks off of you when you hear this, but government doesn't always get in a hurry to help people. Okay. Normally they do, right? But they don't always operate this way. And so if you're operating at the speed of law and justice, quote unquote, then, it might be, okay, yeah, we'll get to your case here in about 9.5 months, which means 17 months. We ought to be able to get to it and to look at it. Well, this woman's struggling to get by on a daily basis. She really has no choice but to come to him saying, get justice for me from my adversary, even though he would not. Okay, so here's something else, verb tense wise. This is imperfect There's an imperfect verb tense and it's combined with present tense in a lot of these. And it means continuous action. And what this means is, it sounds like in our translations, well, one time she came to him and talked to him. That's not what's being expressed here. She kept on coming to him, which of itself would tell you that she hasn't gotten what it is that she desires. So she keeps coming. And we're going to find out, I don't know that this is just day after day. I believe this also might be night after night. Multiple times in a day, she keeps coming to this judge, making the same request of him. And he would not, we're told, for a while. That implies something as well. Then we're plainly told, but afterward he said within himself, though I do not fear God, nor regard man. I don't think these exact words probably would have been formulated in his head, but in his thinking, this is the way he operates. I don't care anything about God, may not even believe that a God exists. I'm really not concerned about people. About whom do you think he's probably looking out for the most? Oh, absolutely. It's all about him. This is a selfish person. I don't care about God. I don't even know if God exists. I don't care about people. Verse 5, yet I have this problem. There is this woman who won't leave me alone. This woman troubles me, and because of that, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Now, at first you go through this and you think, well, that's not a very inspiring story. That's actually kind of sad. Well, let's get to the spiritual point that Jesus is making. Verse 6, then the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. Unjust is someone who's not fair. Unjust is a person who is unrighteous, not always going by the law, even though he's probably sworn to do such a thing. Now, you think about this for a minute. If you have somebody who swears, and maybe even with the exact words, today we would put the right hand on the Bible, but it says, I swear, so help me God, about following the legal system. And if the person doesn't believe in God, or does and doesn't even really care anything about following God, what difference does that statement really make? And so here's a guy who perhaps is sworn, maybe even if it's a Roman judge, by the gods, plural, above, below, around, everything. But it doesn't even matter. God says, hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God, okay, let's pause right here. Who do you think the judge in this story represents? As far as what's trying to be communicated to us.
It seems like the judge is representing the world and the selfishness that is enveloped with that.
I think so. Very specifically, I think so. But the point of it is this. God is our judge. He's the judge. He's the one who gets vengeance for us. He's the one who rewards. He's the one who punishes. Okay, now just to be very clear, God's character is not reflected by the character of this judge. Jesus makes very clear, hear what the unjust judge said. And then he said, shall God, to talk about our judge, not unjust. He's completely fair. He's righteous. He rules by the law. But quite literally, thank God, he also rules, as we were reminded last week, not only according to law. We're told in James 2:13 to be careful about our judgments and our treatment of others. And the reason for that is judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. But what about the person who has shown mercy, which is synonymous for forgiveness? Mercy or forgiveness, when God does the judging, triumphs over judgment or the strict dictates of law. So our God is righteous and He's fair in His judgments, but quite literally, thank God that He's also merciful and forgiving. But a big part of what we receive in the end is the kind of mindset that we've carried toward others, and whether we have demanded every possible technical detail out of them we could. When someone's paying us back, I hate to be this way, but you shorted me 49 cents. I mean, if that's the way that we are, and then God demands everything out of us he possibly could in judgment, we're going to be in a rough spot. Thankfully, our God is also merciful. This guy's uncaring. He doesn't respect people, doesn't care anything about people. Our God, for some reason, is respectful toward us, and beyond that, he just deeply cares about us. Shall God, who's the just judge, not avenge his own elect, his chosen people, listen to this, who cry out day and night, though he bears long with them, or he doesn't do it just immediately a lot of the time. Sometimes he does. But many times he doesn't give us exactly what we want just the first time that we ask for it. But I want to go back to this widow in the story here really quickly before we bring this together. This widow came to the judge, and we've identified that the judge would represent God not in his character, but in the role that he serves toward us. Who do you think the widow, the poor one who is in need, who could do nothing about the situation, who do you think that'd represent? Yeah, and we look at a story like this and we say, oh, this poor lady, and she's lost her husband and she doesn't have an income and someone has cheated her and she's defenseless. That's poor you. That's poor me. There's nothing we can do about our lot in life, not on our own. But we're to recognize as a widow that we have a help. And we can go to him. This widow does, day and night, consistently. Now, do you think that means that the widow had set up a tent at the feet of the judge, and she just kept talking all day long and just repeated the same request over and over and over and over and over, never stopped, never slept, never ate, never had a conversation with anybody else? It means that she would go to him every day, multiple times in a day. She was consistent in her request. Okay, does that help going back to the punchline of the parable, verse 1? Jesus spoke a parable to them that men always ought to pray and not lose heart. It's not that we're praying every second of every day. That is a literal impossibility. But it's that we're consistent in the requests that we make of our just, merciful, caring judge. With confidence, we go to him every day, multiple times in a day. That's what it means always to pray, or to pray without ceasing, as is explained very clearly in the parable. So bringing it together, verse 6, the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with him? The unjust judge in the story does this for the widow. But why does he do it? For selfish reasons. Marcy, I'm sorry. Okay, and it sounds awful, doesn't it? But it's the blunt truth of the matter. Leave me alone. I don't care about you, and I never want to see you again. That's what he's thinking. So God will do what the unjust judge did, but not for the same reasons. Why does the just, merciful, caring, forgiving judge of heaven do for us, his chosen, as he does in granting our request? Why does he do that? A, because he cares, and he sees that we're bothered by it. And if you're really concerned about something, why wouldn't God just, oh, you want that? Okay, you want that? Why wouldn't he do that just every time we make a request? Why does he make us pray multiple times in a day, every day, about the same things? Sometimes, why does he, I'm sorry, but I'm getting there. Oh, okay. Most of us here have children, so you love your kids, right? I mean, they're the apple of your eye. Some of us have grandkids. I can only imagine how much more. They're like the apples that taste like strawberries or pineapples probably to your eye. I mean, they're a really good kind of apple. But why haven't you given your kids everything? First request they've ever made to you. Why haven't you done that? And even if you don't have kids, you can answer still. Yeah. So is that why Brooks had to wait so long for his purple unicorn? Dad, I really need a purple unicorn. And if you immediately, get the really difficult and or expensive thing for them just right then and there, and it's always that way, what kind of kids do they become? Okay? They're needy, as you put, the opposite would be unappreciative, right? And quite frankly, they become spoiled brats. Nobody wants to be around, and 20 years from now, nobody wants to interact with them in life. And so we teach our kids patience, appreciation, and we help them not to become spoiled brats, and they become very productive in society. And you know what? Those are some pretty likable folks, aren't they? And not kids once they become adults. There you go. If I'd have gotten everything I wanted through 12 years old, and someone, whether me or mom and dad, would have paid for it, we would have probably been negative $4.8 billion. So, but you know, it's like 98% of those things that I wasn't quite that way toward mom and dad. Hey, mom, I want this. Sometimes I did ask for things, though, if I got up the gumption. And more often than not, it was, okay, well, if you really want that, then, here's a method we could go about to get that, and it's going to take me 18 months? I'd cry about it that night. The next day, I'd forgotten what it was I wanted that day. A lot of things are that way. We don't really want those things. A lot of times, they're not things that are even best for us if we were to really think it through. A few years ago, I had my heart set on getting some, are they called miniature goats? No, what are they? Dwarf? No, what are they? Don't do it. Okay, say no. So, I heard that, so okay. Nigerian dwarf goats. Okay, thank you. Okay, dwarf goats, not mini goats. All right. Mini golden doodles, what we're looking at right now. And okay, so two things about this. About these dwarf goats, I really wanted them, and Vanessa, she put her foot down. The kids wanted them, of course. Vanessa put her. We do not need goats. I think we should get them. I wasn't very happy that night when she said, no, we can't get the goats. And here we are 2 years later. She saved our lives. My wife did. First of all, so I have a student who raises these Nigerian dwarf goats. That's who we're going to get them from. And apparently, they're fickle. They die left and right, these things. They're even to keep alive. So right now, the kids and I, we have our hearts set on a mini golden doodle. I never thought I would say it, but I'm finally ready for our first family dog, I think, an indoor dog. Hypoallergenic, so I think we can make this work. It's not enormous. We'll see. But here's the thing. We really wanted one, the kids and I, right around Christmas. And Mama put her foot down. And we were all mad at Mama for a while. But then we got to thinking, just as far as the potty training and our schedules and all, she's probably right. So I said, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. If we can get one, later and in the summer, that's the deal. Well, here we are about 6 months later, and it should be hopefully 2 or 3 more months. And I think we have plans with the breeder and all to get our first mini golden doodle. We're excited. The thoughts about it haven't changed, and the desire has just ramped up even more, and I think the appreciation will be more than what it was. And I know that's a silly example, but about how parents work with children, how the Heavenly Father works with His children. Sometimes He's testing us. Is that something that you really want? And if you'll give me a little time, I'll show you how that's something you don't need, and you're going to forget about it. But if not, and you're serious, you'll really appreciate when I grant you what it is that you've requested. Okay, verse 8. When we're asking God for help in the things that we need in this life, is He ever going to step in? Is He ever going to intervene? Who wants to say our memory verse in number 8? Karen? Excellent. Way to go. That's perfect. That's word for word. He says, I tell you that He will avenge them. He will grant their request. And when He does, it's not going to be slow. It's going to happen in the blink of an eye at the perfect time. It will occur. And then he goes on and asks this question. Nevertheless, side note of this, Jesus tosses in one of my favorite tossed in side notes of all the Bible. This is a real gem right here, a hidden one. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man arrives, will He really find faith on the earth? Go back to Luke 17, verse 5. How does all this section begin? The disciples make this request of Jesus, Lord, increase our faith. So when we're considering how is it that we generate more faith, Certainly it is a way. Romans 10:17. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. I need to study the Bible more. Sometimes that's true. What's Jesus telling us right here? How do we increase our faith? How do we depend more on God? He doesn't need it, but we do. Prayer. Spend more time in prayer. Are we praying every day? Are we praying multiple times a day? And then Jesus asked this, when I come back, when the time is right, am I really going to find faith on the earth? What does he mean by that? Is he really going to find people studying the Bible? Okay, that's something to consider. I don't think that's the context here, right? When I come back, am I going to find people with strong prayer lives? What he's asking. Am I going to have my people who are praying to me every day, multiple times a day in heartfelt prayer, telling God of his greatness and how subservient and how needful we are of his mercy? Am I going to find that? People who truly depend on me for every walk in life, who thank me for every good thing that comes up, even the small things. When someone opens a door for me right at the perfect time, to be able to have a smile on my face and to genuinely appreciate that. When I have something going on it's not the best situation at work, and I come back, am I going to find people who are praying to me about the work, not to Jesus, but to the Father through Christ, praying about the work situation, really trusting in me to set things straight? Am I going to find that? And then we come to this in verses 9 through 14. Also, he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous. This goes back to Luke 17:5. Jesus, we need some help here. Will you increase our faith? Sure, let me tell you a story. There's this guy who didn't trust in God at all. He thought he had it all figured out. And, you look at his works, he's a pretty good guy. And then he has this side to him also. He despised others. What would you call somebody, and this might sound familiar to you, what would you call somebody who has no need to trust in God, who thinks he or she is perfect in every way? He or she is the one who walks on water, not Jesus, the Son of God. And everyone else will never live up to his or her standards. What would you call that person? Give me a few descriptors. Self-centered, arrogant, a fool, good, a narcissist, excellent. That's a big word. I didn't have to ask for that to be repeated. I'm surprised. I heard it the first time. Okay, what else? Egocentric or an egomaniac. I think someone might have said, arrogant. Okay, let's say prideful. Same thing, basically. So that's this guy. But man, if you were just to look at his life, you would think he has all of his I's dotted and all of his T's crossed. All right, so here's the story, verse 10. There were two men who went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Let's talk about public perception right here. These people in the first century, how did they view the Pharisees? A lot of these are going to be your rabbis, your teachers, we might call them today, your church preachers, back then synagogue and temple. As righteous, absolutely. What else? Okay, that's true. Were you completely born in sin and you rebuke us? They despise others. They see everyone else as sinners and they themselves as perfectly righteous in every way. Thank you for that excellent explanation. Okay, so then you have the tax collector on the other hand. Public perception. What do you got here? Tax collector. Bunch of thieves. Yeah. And you've heard it 1,000 times, but how do you view an IRS agent? Hey, my best buddy, let's go play golf today. No, you stay in your big city and I'll stay down here away from you. You don't talk to me. You don't write a letter to me for sure. Right? That's the way that we would see it. When you see someone like that, would you think cream of the crop for heaven in a tax collector? Oh, no. So public perception is, if this guy doesn't make it, no one's going to. with the Pharisee. And then the tax collector, if this guy gets in, I don't want to be there. All right, that's the way people see these two. Well, let's get some more information about these. Verse 11. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. Okay, a couple things here. First of all, his posture. He stands. And he prays thus, I like the terminology here, with himself. It's like almost like he's praying to himself. Certainly, he's going to be talking a lot about himself. God, and that's about as close as he gets to anything divine right there in the addressal. I thank you. Oh, well, okay. Well, at least he has a grateful spirit. Hang on just a second. That I am not like other men, extortioners. Those are people who'd be unjust in money and their dealings with money, harsh in their treatment with others. Unjust. I thank you I'm not unfair. I thank you that I'm not unrighteous. I don't do the wrong thing. I thank you that I'm not an adulterer. I don't cheat on my wife. I certainly thank you I'm not like this guy. Who's that? If he's going, I don't want to be there. All right, this is the tax collector right here. All right, how good are you? Verse 12. Oh, I'm pretty good. I fast twice a week. This guy's living under the Mosaic system. So under the law of Moses, how often do people have to fast? What's the requirement for fasting as far as command, a staple, not under special circumstances, normal everyday activity? How many times is a Jewish man commanded to fast? Very good. You're exactly right, Robbie.
So he's doubling up and he thinks that he's better than the law.
Okay, yes. And actually, you're right. And actually even more. So Leviticus 16, 29 and 30, it's on the Day of Atonement, which is the 7th month, the 10th day of that month. On the Day of Atonement, God says, you shall afflict your souls, which is a creative way of saying, give harsh treatment to your body. What's harsh? I don't eat all the Cheeto Puffs. I want to eat that day. So there's this fasting that's commanded on this one day. So here we read, he fasts not twice a year, but twice a week. Obviously 52 weeks in a year. So 104 times in an average year. 104 times. How many times does he have to fast? Once. He's actually doing 100 times, greater than 100 times beyond what he has to do. Now, you see someone like that, what are you going to think? Whoo. If he doesn't make it, nobody's going to make it. That's what you'd think, wouldn't you? He goes on to say, I give tithes, or a tenth, of all that I possess. And you look back at this terminology, and I don't think it's saying a tenth of everything that he owned. I know it reads that way in some of our translations, but it seems to be a tenth of his income or his increase, everything that is brought in. Remember Jesus, Matthew 23, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, the seasonings from your garden vegetables. Now, at first it sounds like he's criticizing that. He's actually not. He goes on to say, these you ought to have done, or that's right, that's proper, not to overlook the increase that God has given you, whatever way that is. But here's the problem, scribes and Pharisees, without neglecting the weightier or more important matters of the law, justice and mercy, and this is a key one here, faith. What's faith again? Strictly, I know we have our Hebrews 11:1, that's a good application or description of it, but as far as textbook definition goes, it's dependence. Upon whom? Upon God, and not a reliance upon yourself. Okay, you're doing really well in adhering to these strict details of the law. You should. God has expectations out of you, but not to the neglect of your dependence on God for you to be qualified for the person you want to be and to go where it is that you desire to spend forever. He forgot about the most important part of all, and that he'll never be good enough on his own to get there. So this guy, I give tithes of all that I possess. That's not a criticism, that's a positive thing. He should be doing that. But then you have this guy, verse 13, the tax collector standing afar off. What does that tell you about his demeanor? You know, it's kind of like We talked about a dog. So kind of like about the dog who did the naughty thing. We had a neighbor dog. The kids love him. Rocky. He's this big white lab. Beautiful dog. And really sweet. He's a little ornery too. He's a dog. And so, he knows we like him, especially the kids. So he goes up around the kids, and I was waiting for him. And just immediately starts going toward the garage where the cat food is. I said, Rocky. He turned right around, went back home. He knew he's ornery. But he'll kind of stand a little bit away from me. A little shy, wouldn't you say? Well, this guy, he's kind of shy. And the reason is he knows he's been ornery. And he won't so much as even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his chest, and that's imperfect verb tense, meaning he kept striking his chest, which in that culture means to indicate repentance, saying, God be merciful to me, a sinner. Actually, a better translation is not an indefinite article, which isn't found in the Greek at all, but it's the definite article that's used here, and literally saying, be merciful to me, the sinner. Doesn't make any expression of any other sinners. And I think what he's suggesting is this. I can't get past how many times I failed God and how awful it was when I did it. He doesn't even have the time or the space to see any other sinner around him because of how much of a sinner he knows he is. I think it's similar to Paul's statement when he refers to himself as the chief of sinners. That's the way he looks at himself right here. Verse 14, Jesus speaking, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. Wow. The guy who doesn't have a single positive thing that he can say about his week in productivity to God, it may be that he did some good things and he doesn't bring it up. It may be that he didn't do a single good thing at all. And then you have the other guy who does what's required of him in many respects. In one, he does 100 times more than what he has to. And yet he's still lost in his sins. And the other child of God is saved. What's the difference between the two? Two things. One is humility. What's the other one? The request that's been made by the disciples. Faith or dependence on God. So we're going to close on that, and I ask each of us to consider, and please don't misunderstand. As Jesus would say, these you ought to have done. The Lord has expectations out of us, and it's required for us to give effort to do our very best to walk in the light as He is in the light, 1 John 1:7. But don't forget about verse 9 of 1 John 1. And with 8, it's not a matter of if, but when we sin. You will. I will. We do. And where does our faith lie? Is it, but I did do 100 times more than I had to, even though I did this wrong thing. That one wrong is enough to disqualify you. Is your trust in yourself, or is it in the only one who can save you? Because that's the only place salvation is found. I know we didn't get to the rich ruler, but that's okay because we're going to dig pretty deeply into him next week. I ask you to read or reread the remainder of chapter 18. We will also, the good Lord willing, and I think we will, get through verse 10 of chapter 19. Through verse 10 of chapter 19. Roy? It could be. Yeah, some believe that about him, and I could see that as an argument for sure. Looking forward to that discussion. Yeah, thank you, Roy. Let's also not forget our memory verse from last time, Luke 17:10. So likewise you, when you have done all the things you are commanded, after, Lord, increase our faith, have this attitude, Lord, we are unprofitable servants. We have done nothing more than what was our duty to do. You know, you'll see people in the service, and you genuinely are grateful for them, you respect them, and you say, thank you for what you've done. A lot of times you hear, it's nothing. It's been my honor. That's the attitude that we're to carry toward our commander in our faith. Okay, verse 39 of Luke 18 is our memory verse. Luke 18:39. If nothing further, we'll close on that. Thank you.